What's up, y'all? I'm back. This is going to be Grain Sessions episode 6. If you watched the last episode, you would have seen me rehearse a 6 slide presentation for the SciCloj community, the scientific computing group within the Clojure community. I rehearsed that a little bit, and then like an hour later, I just gave a small update. That's what that meetup was about. And I tried to deliver this. And ultimately, it didn't. Maybe it landed with a couple people, but it didn't land overall. No one really expressed interest in it. Um, and my observation after having gone through about 3 periods of talking to SciCloj has revealed something interesting to me. So, at the end of maybe like middle to end of 2025, I gave a talk about behavior trees, and because before we had before we had orc, before we had orc, I tried to put these behavior trees into Grain as kind of like a static library, and the idea was that we were going to Um, it's deprecated, but there's a behavior tree engine in Grain. And what we were going to try to do was orchestrate like DSPy modules through libpython CLJ with behavior trees orchestrating at the closure level. Well, that worked. I mean, we did it, but we ran into um, challenges and shortcomings. And the reason for that is all the reasons that Orc exists, which is that these kinds of agentic workflows should live in a database. They shouldn't live in your code because they have to evolve, and you need a laboratory environment and a kind of a production line um, to produce better workflows over time. And just uh, agentic software appears to have its own information system domain that combines in a nice way with product domains. And so if you have an information system domain, you your stuff needs to live in a database. But back then, at the end of 2025, I gave a talk at SciCloj, or multiple actually, about grain, and I didn't explain grain proper because I was still trying to figure out how to explain it to people. And I still am, to be honest with you. But so I didn't explain all the details on the CQRS and event sourcing stuff and all that. I did a little bit, but I presented about behavior trees, and everyone seemed to like that. And everyone who's seen those talks, if they recognize me from those, they say great talk. Like I really enjoyed that. And that talk was effectively about reining in AI development to make it more reliable and reasonable. And nothing's changed um, about what I'm saying or presenting since then. And then there was these two community meetups. One of them was earlier this year, I think, and then another one was over the weekend. And nothing's changed about what I'm saying except that I'm trying to explain grain proper to people now, because if you like the whole behavior tree thing in orc, then orc is just made on top of grain, and so you know, and grain is what allows us and our company to produce software in a reliable way. And so I present this, and I didn't present last meetup. I kind of uh, didn't have any visuals to go along with it, and I just kind of like expressed what we were talking about. Um, and then this one, I had this set of slides, and it's intentionally sparse on details because it's the tip of the iceberg. Like I mentioned last time, I'm not going to explain everything. I can't explain everything in 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, really like 10 or 11 minutes. Um, but it just kind of felt like I was presenting to a brick wall. And this note has been ringing in the community, and I'm sure it's ringing in like every community. Um, and I think the The best explanation I have is that programmers really identify with their work quite a lot, maybe more than other industries and job fields. And I think that's because so much of our work happens in the mental realm, like the mental space of the mind. We're really always dealing with ideas and making them manifest through code. And then, of course, people really do enjoy the coding part because we spend so much time in the beginning of our careers and maybe forever during our careers uh, developing our own like aesthetics and style for coding, and the activity itself of bringing those ideas to life is fun and enjoyable. And maybe other jobs are like this, like, I don't know, accountants and bridge builders and physicists and like I don't know, maybe. But I know, being a programmer, I know that I used to identify with my work quite a bit, and that caused me some problems back in the day. So I've kind of decoupled that part, and it's like, yes, I enjoy programming, and I love the craft, but I don't identify. However, I think a lot of people do, and I think it's natural and it's normal. And so I know, even for myself, even after having stopped really identifying with my work so much as a person, in 2025, at the beginning of 2025, I really did not think that AI assisted coding, like to the level that it did, would be viable for at least another year or two. And by the middle of 2025, I was wrong. Like, I was proven wrong. And I definitely went through this like micro grief cycle where I was like upset, confused, disoriented, mad, sad, like, but being as I work at a company that it has been proactively in the AI space this whole time, since 2024, I had to get over that because part of my job is figuring out how to actually use and apply this technology in the industry in a way that is not completely brain dead. And so I just leaned in. That was my answer. I said, if this is going to happen, well, at least I have grain. At least I can, at least basically what I'm doing is automating the code that I would have written already in the way that I would have done it. In the large, like at the software architecture level, I've never really been one to care about the like line by line how the code is sort of structured. I think that's highly aesthetic, highly divergent between developers, and I've never been one to nitpick code and code reviews and stuff like that. If it works and it doesn't cause problems, cool. Really, the software architecture, even before AI, should be creating a small enough blast radius where those kinds of um, intra-system problems, or code level stuff doesn't really cause problems for the whole system. And so I just leaned in. I said, "Hey, this is here. Time to figure out how to apply this." I noticed that grain was kind of perfect for that, and so I just rolled with it. Other people, I believe, have had a very different experience, and I think actually there's almost as many different perspectives and experiences right now as there are people, because as someone who operates outside of the box, and by the box I mean someone telling me how to use this technology and what to do with it, I get to see very far and I get to try different things in a production setting that I come up with. I think a lot of people are boxed in by their employers and how the employers and sort of the chain of command and management is reacting to this technology and trying to approach it or enforce it internally. And so some people's entire perspectives on AI may be soured um, just because of how their employer is approaching it, and they don't have a lot of free time outside to explore and experiment on their own and find the fun that you can have. um, and by the way, I'm ruling out the like the politicization. Like, it is a political topic. It does have to do with like wealth consolidation and what it all means economically um and politically. Like, yes, like that's all stuff that we do need to sort out. But at the same time, this is technology, and we're in the business of technology, and so I think that regardless of how things shake out, the technology is probably not going away. And so I think that people have, there's like a kaleidoscope of perspectives that are all competing, and it makes it very difficult to even get on the same page and have the same conversation with everyone at the same time. Because back to what I was saying about the grief cycle, I think a lot of developers are being forced to go through this sort of identity crisis right now. And that just means that people are having a hard time. And so even though I'm presenting something that is real engineering that I was working on and designing long before all of this AI coding stuff or even AI was relevant, and that would continue to exist and be useful even in a world where AI disappeared tomorrow. If it's something that feels adjacent to AI or LLMs for some people, they're just going to write it off as like garbage noise. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. And the only thing that can really help us in that case is the acknowledgement of that. And then if there are people in the community that are interested in putting their bias aside to address that root issue of how we communicate about this stuff, given that there's so many perspectives, then I think we could start to make progress. Otherwise, we may just have to wait it out. I think people are going through a hard time. People are having an identity crisis. People are upset because if you identify with your work, then your identity is changing. Where you fit into the world as a programmer, as a developer is changing. And I think it's totally fine and natural to be going through that. I went through it. I don't even think that coming out the other side of it means that you have to be like some kind of AI fanatic. I think it's totally good and even advisable to continue being a skeptic, but there is utility in the technology, and I think you can be a skeptic while exploring and benefiting from the utility. So that's my analysis of what happened when I presented just this, which I did expect to lead to questions rather than silence, but that's just the state of things right now, and I think that eventually that'll change. Everything changes. Okay, so what did I plan to do? I probably plan to keep doing this for a bit, and I was kind of thinking like I might start consolidating a bunch of links to resources that have, because I don't think I can actually get to the end of this without sort of explaining a bit of where I've come from and what's influenced me. And so I think I like need a list of the things that have influenced me. And not all of the things that have influenced me are relevant to grain and all this, but like I do think that on some level I've been following this same thread for my entire career. So it probably makes sense to make a little list of things that are influenced me. So with some Rich Hickey talks because when I was in college at Southeastern in Louisiana, um, we had I was going to be a C sharp developer. I was going to be like a .NET developer. I was reading like C sharp in depth. Let's I was reading C sharp in depth. I was like getting really into like object oriented design patterns and programming because like that's all the stuff that you have to learn if you're going to be like a C sharp person or like one of those .NET enterprise people. And it was a lot of stuff to learn, and it felt good learning it because it's like I think in general as a society we tend to put complexity up on a pedestal, and it's like, oh, the more complex stuff I can learn, the more powerful and smart I am. Well, I started going to the library because I also was interested in sort of like what I considered to be arcane and kind of esoteric knowledge. And so I go to the library. Southeastern has a pretty good library, like tech section in the library, computing. And there were all these books on Common Lisp, um, like let's see, On Lisp by Paul Graham, Maybe now. Maybe I'll start here. I don't know what pasting this in. Okay, so we got a little card. We got cards. Okay, so On List by Paul Graham, and then there was like another crazy one that was like the Common List book. There was like a crazy one. It's like the CLOS. It was like they had like a, I don't know if it had like a dragon on it or something. But it was about the Common Lisp object system or something like that. Looking for. Oh, that might be it. Yeah, the art of the meta object protocol. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this was in the library. See if we can get a nice little card for every link. Yeah. So I was reading books like this. Granted, I had no idea what I was looking at. I want to say, I am not one of those people that has fully read through this book, but I've read parts of it, and it has influenced me. So I'm reading stuff like this. I'm getting exposed to something that looks cool. That's all I know at the time. It's like, this really looks cool. This really looks cool. It caused me to. We had this one class where you could like pick your own programming language to do like a project, and I did all of this reading I was doing caused me to do that in Racket instead of like picking like a common Lisp thing or or any Lisp thing. And so I'm like looking into all this stuff and like this is really cool, super cool. I'm also reading stuff about enterprise design patterns. Definitely like the clean code stuff. Maybe not Amazon. Maybe Goodreads. Can I just get a link there? So maybe like this kind of stuff. And pragmatic programmer. Because what I did when I was in school is I said, hey, what do I need to know in like 5 years after I graduate? And then I started, then this was like around like 2013, 14. Um, and so I started just like reading about all this like industry grade stuff. Let's see. While I'm just enterprise creation patterns. The book, the book, the book, the book. Yes, the book. This is a great book. So I'm like reading about all this stuff. And I'm like trying to relate it back to the Lisp stuff. And I'm like, man, this is cool, but there's like no way that I'm ever gonna get a job. Like who's getting hired to work in Common Lisp? And so I did the most classic way that you ask people in the Clojure community how'd you get into Clojure, and a lot of people will say I was getting inspired by Lisp, and I searched. I did like a Google search for like a Java Lisp or something, and that ends up causing like Rich Hickey talks to surface in your consciousness. Like it'll on Google, like I think, are we there yet? Simple Made Easy. Those started coming up, and these. Let's see. Rich's talks are probably it's probably not an exaggeration to say that Rich's talks is that are we there yet? Yeah. Rich's talks Sorry, I'm just trying to find. I want to find the right ones. It's fine. Just trying to make sure the slides are good. Although, I'm not like publishing this. Okay, we'll use that one. Rich's talks form the bedrock of my ideology, my practice as a software engineer. Rich is Rich, these talks introduced me to the idea of thinking philosophically in the first place about anything, but especially about software and code. Um, there's a moment in Are We There Yet where Rich gives the like Heraclitus quote of the same man never steps in the same river twice or something like that, or the same person. And it just like blew my mind. I was like, I've never thought about anything like that. And it just started to convince me in real time that there are really, really principled ways of building software. And that if you follow these ways, then even if you're kind of new to the industry, you can have superpowers because this field is all about ideas and the space of ideas. And if you can command those ideas in the right way, then there's expressive power in those because we just take ideas in philosophy and manifest them. We manifest them as code into the physical world. And so you don't need to have been everywhere and seen everything, done everything, solved every challenge before in order to to make it all work. I mean, it helps, but you can get by. Oh, that one's not very nice, is it? Get rid of that one. Let's see. So I'm just going through these. Because this is a huge, huge, like even just watch the fact that I'm gonna dig up some papers in a bit and books, and the fact that I ever even read those books is because Rich cites reading papers and books as something that he does in his work to produce his work. I don't like these Vimeo ones, so I'm just gonna skip those. But and so we just show this timeless information showed me about um like how to be as a software engineer, how to be someone that doesn't just take the most like commodified path and approach available and actually go and do something creative. And like you don't have to be a researcher or anything like that or like a, computer scientist or whatever to do this. You can be a practitioner. Okay, that one's not gonna work. You can be a practitioner that uses research that other people have done. You can take stuff that other people have spent a lot of time composing ideas on, and then actually go and like test that out. So it's just unbelievable how many of these talks mattered to me. What was that? Was that language of the system? Language of the system is such a good talk and very related to grain and how I think about it. And it's just like what's so crazy is that anyone this is all here. This is all here for anyone to go and catch up on. And anyone who went and watched all of these and caught up on all of these would be better off for it. Big time. And that's what anyone who asks me like what should I do, I always am just like I send them just like a giant 12-hour list of Rich Hickey talks, curated, of course, in an order that I think is very important. follow. Not that not it's, okay, the order's not that important to follow, but like curated from like a perspective of like someone who's coming in and doesn't really know that much. Yep, core async talk, implementation details of core async, all this stuff is so important. Okay, well, I'm not gonna. The Vimeo ones are they don't come through very well. Transducers, yeah, and of course, like not all of these like there's definitely like I was reading papers and stuff while some of these talks were still coming out and things like that. So it's not entirely linear what I'm going to show, but I want to point out how important Rich's communications are to me and how I build and design. Let's see. So this one, I think all of these are so important. Yeah. So I went on this journey. I'm like, okay, the Lisp pipeline, all of these ideas, which like Rich is bringing us the best ideas that software engineering has ever had to offer, essentially. And then let's figure out like where I went from there. So where I went from there was like Mythical Man Month, and please don't interpret that as being. I mean, in the time period was definitely a lot more like male dominated, but it's really talking about like man hours, like people hours, like time. Like don't let the title stop you from going and reading this really really important book. Let's see, Design of Design. Such a good book. Um, Out of the Tar Pit. Incredible paper. Wait. Oop. So it's Out of the Tar Pit. Functional reactive programming and getting ourselves out of accidental complexity. So Mythical Man Month really introduces the idea of incidental or accidental complexity versus essential complexity or problem complexity. And this actually is connected back to the subject of simple made easy. So one of the most important things that I ever learned from Rich is that simplicity is something that can be observed. It's not subjective or opinionated. It's something that can empirically be observed. So if you understand and use the word correctly, which to use it correctly is to understand that it means um, one fold or one braid. So um, in basically isolated, independent, separated, discriminated, decomposed. And if you use it in that way, then you can actually look at any system of ideas or system of anything and see where the complexity is and say, huh, that's not a simple system. It would be a simple system if we took those apart, made them separate, and then connected them together in a way that we choose so that we're actually managing that accidental complexity, which is what Rich says is code word for your fault. So accidental complexity is like choosing object-oriented programming in a language that requires a file for every class, um, which inherently has an impedance mismatch to building information systems, and you end up with these massive systems of pieces and parts that aren't really compatible with each other. And yeah, there's that's incidental complexity. If you've ever been in one of those situations where it's like we have to rewrite the whole system because no one can work with it anymore, no one can understand it, that's a product of incidental complexity. Problem complexity is actual complexity of the problem you're trying to solve in your business, or your technology is trying to solve this problem, and you have to manage that complexity in order to solve it. You can't get rid of it. Therefore, you want to minimize the amount of incidental complexity you have and maximize the amount of leverage you have to actually solve that problem complexity over a longer time horizon. And so that's really what, like, how Mythical Man Month is playing in, how Design is playing in, how Out of the Tar Pit is playing in, and then why functional programming matters. So another really important paper that just goes into why functional programming matters, and it does matter. Then one of the most influential things I've ever read is certainly the Armstrong thesis, which is cited by Rich in one of the talks. But this is all about Erlang and like the software model of Erlang and Joe Armstrong's experience of working and building this. Just so many good ideas about building systems that don't fall apart whenever they have to do important work. Okay. Now I am going to have to think deeper. There's definitely more. There's definitely more, and maybe we can look through some of this. Mm-hmm. The Red Book. The Red Book was influential for sure. Kind of an obscure series. It's readings in database systems. Very, very influential for me. Let's see. Check my messages here. A brief pause. Okay. So, interestingly enough, so if you read, you can't read the Red Book without learning a little bit more about Michael Stonebreaker, who's a bit of a character. He's the guy that designed and implemented Postgres, and Michael actually references a book in one of his articles. Let's see, land sharks on the Squawk Box. Land sharks are on the Squawk Box. Hello? Can I get to where I'm going? Maybe there's another entry point to this. Sure, this will probably do. Land sharks on the Squawk Box. And then if you can't read that article without learning about Innovator's Dilemma, so this is a bit of a divergence from strictly technical, but it's related to disruptive technology and how to think about it, which does factor into how I think about grain. Incredible book. Innovator's Dilemma is the best book I've ever read on business. I think most books about business are trash, but this one really transformed how I think. So, yeah, Red Book, super important. I read that one kind of late for sure. Here, let's do this so I can have both of these up at the same time. I'm just gonna scan down the list here of papers that I've got. I haven't read all of these papers, but I know there's ones in here that are super important to me. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we got stuff that's jumping out about me. Techniques for file systems. Techniques. Maybe I can copy the name here. I wonder what happens if I drag this over, if anything. Yeah, bibliography entry. That's not the worst thing in the world. And we've got the link to it. I really do like the cards though. So I'm going to copy the title and just search for it. So, kind of distributed systems related, keeping calm. That's a really good paper. Um, this one, linearizability, a technique for concurrent objects. It's an important paper. Oh, come on. Okay, so now we got it. Well, I bet this not even going to load here. Yeah, it didn't load in a very nice way. I really like these cards that it's doing. Because that's going to help me later. Okay, here we go. Yep. Techniques for correctness condition for concurrent objects. Trying to let's see, was this one unbundling transactions? Sounds like something I would have read. But the name's not sticking out to me. Yeah, okay, so these papers on Amazon Aurora definitely influential for me. Because of how they essentially apply some of these concepts from like the linearizability papers and the calm papers and all of that. Like they're basically solving distributed coordination, building systems that don't require consensus, essentially. Just super cool. Yeah, there was like a number of these papers from Amazon at the time. I think I did read this granola paper. I think I did read this. This factors into my thinking somehow. Would have to go back and check why, but there was a lot of stuff I read in 2016 when I was building this like data processing system. Um, One of the first big things I ever built. Okay, I already got this one. What is this? Framework for representing knowledge. Yeah, may have read it. Column-oriented database systems. I think I read this. I think it's just like a survey. One of the best things you can ever do is read a survey paper on something that you're researching. It really gives you a vocabulary and like a taxonomy to use when thinking about things. An adaptive agent-oriented software architecture, and this would have been like before like the agents of today. I definitely read this. It was definitely an influence in how I think. When I think of agents pre all this AI stuff, I think like little autonomous software units that are sort of input-output driven and isolated from one each other, but then they work together to get things done. Survey of distributed stream processing for large stream sources. Definitely would have read that. Definitely would have factored in. Something tells me that's going to be annoying. Yeah, those ones with the security checks just not very cool. It's actually, maybe this will unfurl. Ugh, ResearchGate, come on. I'm trying to make a pretty board here. Might just have to deal with that, I guess. All right, so that one would just be a stupid little thing. Look at that, it's just like a dumb link. Okay, then we have survey of agent-oriented software engineering paradigm. Yep, I probably read that at the time. At the time I was growing up. Most of these survey papers, just like, yeah. If you find a good survey paper, then you really find... It's like someone's already done all the work of collating, like, the best information out there. Let's see. What else? What else? What else? Yeah, container orchestration. Survey on that. Definitely would have read that. For sure. Oh, come on. Can't I just have a nice pretty card? That's all I want. All right, well, we might just have to have another ResearchGate link. What could be done? Oh, come on. Does it even? It does. At least it says the title. Okay. I probably read a lot of these. Oh, communicating finite state machines. I probably read that. Probably read it. Yes, we've got that in there now. Distributed systems for fun and profit. I feel like I probably did read that. Yeah. Okay, pop that in there. And this is far from the only tab I have. So, okay, we got a lot of stuff on event sourcing here. I believe the dark side of event sourcing was influential to me. If anyone even watches these episodes and maybe wants this board to just be available for viewing, I could definitely do that. Oh, Martin Kleppman, the goat of event processing. Some of the best talks on event sourcing and event stream processing, especially. Two different things, but um, looking for stuff that stands out here. Questioning the Lambda article. That sounds relevant. Or the Lambda architecture. Yeah, sounds relevant. Some of this stuff is about stream processing, which I went through a whole stream processing era. But then whenever I finally got to like, um, oh my God, is this Red Planet Labs? It must be. In which case, they do not. Yep, it is. Um, for reasons I'll not go into, they do not get a spotlight, regardless of whether the information was good. A bit of a personal grievance there. Um, Turning the database inside out. Yep, that was a good one. Let me get rid of some of these. Oh, strange loop. I was at the last strange loop. I wish it still was a thing. Let's see. Event sourcing for enterprise. I want to say this might have been pretty good. I had to go through this like stream processing era um in order to finally realize that like I actually just want like a consistent system of record that is very flexible. Um that does not imply stream processing. So, but it can go with it. La 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 la. Let's see. Let's see. Building evolutionary architectures. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff in here. Yeah. I'm not like not the biggest fan of like domain driven design as a thing to actually do, but conceptually it's fun. It's just that you're never gonna get everyone that you work with to go and read these like 1,000-page books on domain driven design. However, conceptually it all makes sense for the most part. I don't know if that's like official. Let's find it on Goodreads. It certainly does factor into my thinking, to this day. It's just not something I'm going to like expose people to as a matter of course. Let's see here. Yeah, there's other stuff. There's other stuff. Dynamic consistency. While I'm here, I mean, this is a bit of a newer idea, but Grain's event store. I did not invent the protocol or spec for it. It follows dynamic consistency boundary, which is what a lot of people in the events sourcing world are doing right now. I just saw it in here, so I figured I'd put it in. Okay. Books. Yeah, yes. Leslie Lamport, influential figure, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. And generally computing. Okay. There's stuff missing from here. There's stuff missing from here like Google's Borg paper. It was really influential to me. There was a paper on Cassandra, which was really influential to me. There was a talk by Bobby Calderwood, which changed my life. So huge shout out to Bobby Calderwood. It definitely, this talk definitely refined my approach to everything. Uh, he himself says some of it's outdated, and I agree. And like I've refined my approach on top of that, and since then. But really incredible place to start for just seeing where the ideas of grain really started to come to fruition. Um, so when I say that I've been working on grain for a long time, what I mean is I co-founded a startup that no longer exists around 2021, and I built basically the first iteration of grain, except it used Kafka streams entirely, like as a database. Um, and that was fun, and I learned a lot. And I decided I would never use Kafka streams like that again, for reasons that I mentioned earlier. It's like you don't need stream processing to do this stuff, and you don't need to give up strong consistency by default. You can have it, and you can choose to loosen it later, but you don't have to give it up by default. So there's no reason to do that. What else? What else? What else? What else? What else? Oh yeah, event modeling, hugely influential to Grain. Adam Dimitrick basically distilled like domain-driven design into the most important parts that anyone can learn fast. And Grain's grammar is just event modeling grammar. Actually, that's what makes it compelling to me. Is like I didn't invent the uniform architecture model for Grain that it uses. It comes from another smart person. I'm just combining ideas here. So there's definitely more. There's definitely more. Um, so Tony Hoare's CSP is very important in how I think, process-oriented thinking. I mean, if we're being real, if we're being real, oh wait, this year's 2026. We haven't had Conj 2026 yet. We're getting there. If we're being real, does David mention, is this from last year? Yes. I think David mentions Datastar in this talk. Datastar has influenced Grain. What else? I mean, there's definitely more. There's definitely more here in terms of how and why Grain is the way it is. And I would say it all stems, first and foremost, from this talk, which a lot of people would say the same thing about their ideology. Simple made easy. If you understand simple, you can have a conversation with anyone about anything that's complex and you can tame the complexity and you can actually learn to design simple systems, which, it may not look like it when you look at the grain repository, because really I'm the only one that's supposed to look at this repo. Like, this is not an ideal way to understand what grain is, but like, these are all individual components that are loosely coupled to each other, and they all do something really specific, and they do it really well. And simplicity, and this will go into like our constraints and assumptions later. In fact, simplicity is a constraint and an assumption. It'll be covered in both ways, I think. Simplicity as a foundational assumption and constraint in your system is something that will diffuse and resonate throughout the entire system, especially if you build layers on layers. So you're building a tower of abstractions. If the bottommost layer is simple, then it allows you, months, years, whatever, however much time later, at the top of this tower of abstraction that you're working on, to keep things simple, because it's simple all the way down. And simple is what allows us to behave flexibly and be tolerant to change and unreliability in lower layers, over time. So I don't know if anyone watching this episode would have really learned anything, but I think that after having gone through this process, I'm now in a better position to tackle the introduction. Who am I? What I do? Why grain exists? How it came to exist? Um, and then all of this will eventually help explain why these primitives are so important, why simplicity is both a constraint and an assumption, and probably stuff down the road as well, because it just lends so much towards composition and composability. Okay, so I'm gonna make this blue because I don't think I'm done. I don't think I'm done with it. But we will come back to it nevertheless and finish it. All right, I think that might be it for today. Don't know when the next one will be, but if I have time, then we can come back and finish up the introduction and maybe work on the problem statement or something. All right, as always, there is a green channel on the Clojure Slack. Let's see. There is a green channel on the Clojure Slack. You're welcome to join it. You're welcome to DM me. You're welcome to do whatever. Message me on LinkedIn. I don't care. Like, happy to. If you're interested in these ideas, happy to help you reach the moment where you can experience it for yourself, or have an aha moment, or even decide that the ideas don't work and that there's something better we could be doing. Nothing I've got going on here is perfect. It just is working in production in real life. It's paying our bills, and so I know there's something to it. But I think it's actually more important for everyone to realize that AI can be forced into a pattern that produces reliable software. You just have to have the right command over the right set of ideas, and you can mix and match those ideas. But what's most important is to identify what is really important and essential, what is not essential, but maybe still useful. And then for you or your company or whatever, figure out your grain or whatever. Like, figure out your way to proceed into this future with confidence. That's what I want to help you with. So, all right. See you later.